Sometimes that dream job in Formula One rolls up and you can become a world champion. Other times you find yourselves at a team that can barely make a car move, let alone race at a competitive level. And then when your career peters out in Formula One, you need something else to do. And quite often, people found themselves racing in the British Touring Car Championship. Here are 10 drivers who once raced in Formula One but ended up in the British Touring Cars. Most people probably know Guy Edwards as the man who pulled Niki Lauda from his burning racing car during the 1976 German Grand Prix. But the man actually had an unremarkable Formula One career, racing for Graham Hill's racing team in the 1974 season with a best position of 7th at Sweden and 8th in Monaco, but a couple of retirements and did not qualify at other racetracks. He only did half a season anyway. 2 years later, he'd raced for the Penthouse Rizla team, which again would feature did not qualify in Belgium and a best position of 15th at the 1976 German Grand Prix. And in 1977, he'd enter one Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix, for which he did not pre-qualify for BRM. His British touring car career wasn't much better, as he would have 2 seasons racing for the Rouse Sport Ford Sierra team, with a couple of podiums in Class A, but never really challenging Andy Rouse for any victories.
Because Guy Edwards there is just 2 seconds behind him now. Guy Edwards making a terrific effort in the closing stages of the race. Into the S's goes Andy Rouse. And there's a squeal of tyres. Edwards is off.
Johnny Cecotto would spend the 1983 season with the Theodore Racing Team. He'd score a point at Long Beach, but the rest of his season was spent retiring from 3 races and not qualifying for a further 4. In 1984, he'd spend half a season with the Tolman team, where he would retire from 7 races, not qualify for the British Grand Prix, and have a best finish of 9th in Canada. His British touring car career was spent with 1 season in 1995 with BMW, where he would have a few 4th place finishes, but not much else, and he'd end up the season 12th. David Brabham probably wishes he never bothered entering Formula One in the first place. He'd spent 1990 with his father's team, by this point washed up beyond all belief, where he would spend most of the season either not qualifying or retiring from races. The one race he did finish was in France, and he only finished 15th. He'd take 4 years to get back to this level with Simtech, but again, he'd retire from 10 races that season, with his best finish being a 10th in Spain and 11th in Hungary. In 95, he would enter the British Touring Cars with BMW, teammates to Johnny Cecotto. And just like his teammate, he would have a mediocre season, finishing 1 point below him in the standings. Even Formula One legends would race in the British Touring Car Championship. Nigel Mansell's Formula One career began with Lotus in 1980, before changing to Williams in 1985 and taking his first victories. He'd changed to Ferrari in 1989, and after winning a few races would go back to Williams in 91. In 92, he'd capture the title, before being frozen out of the team in 93 by Prost signing and heading to America to win the kart series. He'd return in 94 after the death of Senna, winning the last race in Australia before moving to McLaren in 95 and having no success whatsoever, racing only 2 races before retiring for good. His British touring car career is a bit more complicated. In 93, he entered the Toka Shootout, and if you want to know how that went, just watch the interludes in this video. He'd come back in 98 and race for Ford, where, in the wet at Donington, he would qualify 19th in the feature race before finding himself in the lead of the race. Towards the end, he'd drop back and finish 5th, but it was still a sign of the master driver that he really was. However, the rest of his British touring car career is pretty forgettable. Winkelhock's Formula One career is basically a non-starter, and this is a bit of a stretch. He'd entered 7 races with AGS in 1989, and he wouldn't pre-qualify for any of them. He'd have a lot more success in touring cars, having a lot of international success, as well as winning the British touring cars in 93. He'd win a few races in 94, as well as 96, but that's all he entered in British touring cars.
Off! It's Tarquini! What happened?
The godfather of touring cars would start his Formula 1 career in 1987 with a single race for Osella, before moving to Colony Spa in 1988. He made have a pretty terrible season. He had moved to AGS in 89 and 90 and 91, but he would fail to qualify for most of the races and gained a single point in Mexico. He had moved to Fondmetal at the end of the 91 season, and in 92 he retired from every single race except the British Grand Prix. His final race in Formula 1 was in 95 with Tyrrell, where he finished 14th in the European Grand Prix. His touring car career was much more successful, winning the British touring cars in 94 with Alfa Romeo, before returning again in 97 with Honda and getting a single win and finishing 6th in the series. In 2000, he'd again returned with Honda, getting 3 wins and finishing again 6th. He'd also win the European Touring Car Championship, the World Touring Car Championship, and just last year won the World Touring Car Cup, so still a very talented driver. Roland Ratzenberger's Formula 1 career was tragically short, entering 3 races for Simtech in 1994, not qualifying for the Brazilian Grand Prix, and then finishing 11th at the Pacific Grand Prix. He wouldn't start the race in San Marino due to sadly being killed in qualifying a single day before Ayrton Senna's death. He spent half a season in the British touring cars in 1988, racing a Group B BMW, where he would take a single-class win against the dominant pro-drive BMWs of Frank Sittner and Mike Smith. Most people probably know Tiff Needell as a presenter on Top Gear and Fifth Gear, but the man actually entered 2 races in Formula 1 in 1980 with the Ensign team. He would retire from the Belgian Grand Prix and then not qualify for the Monaco Grand Prix. His touring car career was sporadic, first entering in 1987 with a Group D Toyota, before in 1989 entering a Class A Ford Sierra with Lawrence Bristow, winning the endurance race where there was driver swaps. He had returned in 92 with Nissan for the last race, before spending half a season with them in 93, but not scoring any points. He would again return with Nissan in 94, getting a couple of point-scoring finishes, but only racing half a season again, before making a one-round appearance in 98, again with Nissan, and then a final appearance in 2001, racing a production-class Honda Accord, finishing 14th. Not much needs to be said about David Coulthard's Formula 1 career. It started in 1994 with Williams, before taking his first victory in the Williams in 1995 in Portugal. In 96, he moved to McLaren, where he had spent the majority of his career, taking many victories along the way, before moving to Red Bull for the last few years of his career, where he'd have a couple of podiums before retiring just before they became a successful juggernaut of a team. His brief British touring car career actually was only 1 race in 1990 in a Vauxhall Cavalier in Class B, at the 9th round at Brands Hatch, where he finished 13th. Damon Hill raced in the British Touring Car Championship, a fact that I like to bust out at parties, which explains why I don't get invited to any anymore. He started his career with the failing Brabham's team in 1992, before quickly jumping ship to Williams in 1993. He'd have most of his success there, finishing 3rd in the championship that year, before finishing 2nd in 94 and 95, and then winning the world title in 96. He'd make the strange move to Arrows in 1997, where he'd almost win in Hungary. He'd spent his last 2 years with Jordan, where he'd take their first ever victory in Belgium, before retiring in 1999. His very brief British touring car career was 1 single race in 1989 in the endurance classics they used to have, sharing his Ford Sierra with Sean Walker. And that's it. There isn't much else to say about it than that. And that's the end of this video. But don't worry, I have plenty more drivers who raced in Formula 1 and eventually British touring cars. So, if you want to see that, like and subscribe and leave a comment and whatever, and I'll talk to you soon.
Now the chicane. So Harvey is 3rd, Hill is 4th, Percy, we're with him, is 5th. And Damon Hill hits Harvey as they go out of the chicane. Percy is past Hill up fourth position.